So, Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm here, Salman Anjum, once again at my YouTube channel, and the topic we are discussing is cells, the basic unit of life. So, last time we were discussing uh, about cells, what they are, and we quite extensively defined what cells are and what they are doing. We also defined the cell theory, and we also mentioned the role and discoveries of different scientists who contributed nicely to develop a beautiful cell theory. So, but there are many other things related to cells that we are going to discuss. For example, there are two important words, or you can say biological vocabulary, which is unicellular and multicellular. Basically, there are two kind of organisms. One who are composed of just one cell, they're called unicellular, and the other who are composed of or who contain more than one cell, they are called multicellular. Well, as the name is indicating, unicellular, which means uni means single and cellular means single-celled organism ultimately, and multi means many, cellular means having cells. So those organisms who has more than one cell or who are not unicellular, they are multicellular. So you can very easily draw a unicellular as well as a multicellular. For example, I want to draw on this left side a unicellular organism. Let's say you draw a cell and this is just one whole organism. This is called a unicellular organism. And if on the right panel I want to draw a multicellular organism, I can draw it this way: 1, 2. If it has two cells, more than one cell, it is a multicellular organism. But mostly multicellular organisms, they have more number of cells. So if I keep on adding cells over each other, so this is one organism. This is called a multicellular organism, while this is a unicellular organism. So if I give you this task to find out any example of the unicellular or the multicellular, or who the organisms from unicellular or multicellular are who can be seen easily, so what would be your answer? So of course, answer would be you would not be able to see a unicellular organism without using microscope, while most of the multicellular organisms can be seen with your naked eyes. So things become very easy then. You can take many examples. Let's say you are taking examples of multicellular organisms. So I would put here plants. I can see plants very easily. I don't need any microscope to see them. So that means plants are multicellular organisms. That means plants, they are composed of millions of cells. And then animals. I can see cats, dogs, fishes, or other animals just moving around, even the birds. So these animals, they're composed of too many cells. That's why I can see them very easily. And even, of course, humans. We are also multicellular organism, just like other animals. And we are also composed of too many cells. That's why we can see each other. Then if we take the example of unicellular organism, the example would be bacteria. We know that bacteria are abundantly present in our surrounding. They are sitting on our skin, They are moving around in the air. They are abundantly present in the kitchen. They are eating our food. There are good bacteria, there are bad bacteria, but we cannot see them, although they are abundantly present, because they are just made by one cell, because they are unicellular. So we would require a microscope to see the bacteria or the unicellular organism. Other example of the unicellular organism were protists. I would explain later how protists they are different from bacteria. But these are unicellular and these are multicellular organisms. So if we move on, then there come two more complex terminologies in biology. One is called prokaryotic organism and the other one is called eukaryotic organism. Or simply, you can classify the organisms as prokaryotes or eukaryotes. Now I explain the difference between, or I define them, who are prokaryotes and who are eukaryotes. Please do not get very confused with unicellular, multicellular, with this terminology, prokaryote, eukaryote, because being unicellular simply means if it has one cell, it is unicellular. Multicellular means if it has many cells, that means it is multicellular. But prokaryotic and eukaryotic things are entirely different terminologies. Let's say I draw a cell here. You know about that cells, they contain DNA. I draw the DNA inside the cell. Okay, I draw another cell here and draw the DNA. This is DNA. This is DNA inside. And in this cell, I cover this DNA with another membrane or layer. So what is a difference between these two cells? You can clearly see that this cell, the top cell, although it contains DNA, but DNA is not wrapped around by another layer. While in this cell, this is a cell, it has the DNA just like this, but its DNA is further protected by a layer, and this cell is lacking in that layer. So this is a difference between prokaryote and eukaryote. So this one is a prokaryote, while this cell is a eukaryote. So the definition is, in the case of prokaryotes, the DNA is not covered. It is present inside the cell, but it is not further covered. While in the case of eukaryotes, the DNA which is present inside the cell, it is further covered by a membrane. And when this DNA is further covered in a small chamber inside the cell, this small capacity inside the cell is called a nucleus. So you can define a eukaryote this way, that the eukaryotes, they have a cell in which nucleus is present, while in the case of prokaryotes, they have a cell in which nucleus is not present. While in the case of prokaryotes and eukaryotes, they both contain DNA, but the difference is at the level of nucleus. Eukaryotes, they contain nucleus, while prokaryotes, they do not contain nucleus, but both they contain DNA. So on the basis of being prokaryotic and eukaryotic, we can further define the unicellular and multicellular. So I try to define that for you. Okay, on this slide, first you see, or you help me to find out who are prokaryotic cells and who are eukaryotic. Let's say this is a model cell and this is showing the DNA in blue inside. And this DNA is not covered further. So that means this cell does not have a nucleus. So this cell is a prokaryotic cell. While this cell on the right panel contains a nucleus, as you can see here. So this is a nucleus which contains inside the DNA. So that means this is a eukaryotic cell. So we are not mentioning this time, just for the sake of simplicity, that what are these components which are not shown here. We'll define what are these, but we are simply defining a difference between prokaryote and eukaryote, that the prokaryotes, basically the very basic difference is that the prokaryotes, they do not contain nucleus, while the eukaryotes, they contain nucleus. But of course, as you can see very clearly here, that the eukaryotes, they also contain other things which are called different organelles, while the prokaryotes, they do not contain those organelles, most of them. For example, nucleus is one kind of organelle which is not present in prokaryotes. This in red is labeled as mitochondrion. This is absent from prokaryotes. This here in yellow is labeled as peroxisome. This is absent from prokaryote. Lysosome, absent in prokaryote. So this way there are many other organelles, for example endoplasmic reticulum, absent in prokaryote. So in the later slides we are going to define in detail what are the organelles and what are the benefits of having them in the eukaryotic system. But before this time, for the sake of simplicity, we are simply defining the difference between prokaryote and eukaryote, that the prokaryotic cells, they do not contain most of the organelle, especially let's say the nucleus, or in the case of eukaryotes, nucleus is clearly seen, it is present, plus many other organelles which are present in eukaryotes. Okay, now if we apply the terminology prokaryote and eukaryote on being unicellular and multicellular. So if I draw here a unicellular cell, so unicellular can be of two types. Unicellular organisms can be like this, and unicellular can be like this. So this unicellular organism contains nucleus. It's a single cell, that is why I'm saying this one as unicellular, but this contains nucleus, while this is also a unicellular organism because it is having just one cell, but this cell does not contain any nucleus. So that means this kind of unicellular organism is a prokaryotic type unicellular. They both are unicellular, both, but this is a prokaryotic type unicellular organism, and this is also unicellular because it is composed of just one cell, but it has the nucleus. So this is a eukaryotic type unicellular. This is a prokaryotic type unicellular, and this is eukaryotic type unicellular organism. That means unicellular organisms can be of two types. One who are prokaryotes, and other kind of organism who are unicellular but they can be eukaryotic. Now examples. Prokaryotic type unicellular organisms are bacteria, while eukaryotic type unicellular organisms are protists. These are the same protists we were talking before, which were discovered from the pond water. They are unicellular, but they contain nucleus, so they are called eukaryotic type unicellular, and they are named as protist. It's a major difference between protists and bacteria. The bacteria, they are also unicellular, but they do not contain nucleus, so they are prokaryotic unicellular microorganism. While all the multicellular organisms are eukaryotic type. They all are eukaryotes. There is no multicellular organism who is prokaryote. They all are eukaryote, whether small multicellular or large multicellular. For example, human being, plants, big animals, they all are eukaryotes. That means they contain nucleus in their cells. So, just once again, bacteria, they are unicellular and they are prokaryote because they don't contain nucleus. So they are prokaryote. Type of bacteria, there can be many. For example, Escherichia. For example, Salmonella. Then, who are protist? They are also unicellular, just like bacteria, but they are quite different because they are eukaryote. That means they contain nucleus. Examples are Paramecium, amoeba, then human being. So all human, plants, and other animals, if they are multicellular, of course, so they all are eukaryotes because they are composed of many cells. So every single cell, in the case of multicellular organism, they all contain nucleus and other organelles, so they are eukaryotic type cells. As they are defining here, they're multicellular organisms, they all are eukaryotic. So if you have any questions further, please do not hesitate to ask me. Thank you so much.